Hello, my name is Zahar Karetsky, and this is the Transitions Visions, a podcast series about and for the sustainability transitions community. Today we venture to the intersection of heritage studies and transition studies. Cultural heritage is heavily impacted not only by climate change, but also colonial legacies. This is the theme of my conversation with Abbie Yunita, postdoctoral researcher at the Copernicus Institute of Sustainable Development in Utrecht University, who works on the topic of cultural heritage in coastal communities in climate change, in the project Sea Change, Socio-Ecological Archiving, Coastal Communities' Heritage in Times of Climate Change. How do communities see these impacts? What is the role of heritage in post-colonial narratives? And how are the Dutch waterworks implicated? Find out right now. Hi Abbie, nice to have you on the podcast.
Nice to be here, thanks for having me.
Yeah, it would be very curious to talk to you about your projects that you're part of, Sea Change, about coastal communities. And I know that in terms of heritage and coastal communities, my kind of experience with it is that there are those in Alaska, for example, there are certain practices that are protected and they are disappearing because of climate change, because of the rise of sea level, because of droughts as well. And they are actually, these practices are disappearing, but they are being protected. Could that case, nebulous case that I kind of remember from my PhD, could that fit into the topic of Sea Change Project, Coastal Communities Heritage in Times of Climate Change?
Absolutely. But I guess Sea Change is interested also in how climate change itself is perceived and understood in relation to cultural heritage practices.
Right.
We want to know how climate change is affecting cultural heritage, but also how other factors, perhaps as quote-unquote natural, have implications on cultural heritage. Yeah. So in one of our case studies in Indonesia, in La Malera, it's the last subsistence whaling community in Indonesia. Their whaling practices are threatened by climate change, but there are also other factors that have transformed sort of their traditional practices, including modernization, clashes with other conservation paradigms. So it's not just climate change that is affecting cultural heritage. That's certainly one factor, but cultural heritage has been shaped and reshaped by other factors in the present and in the past. Yeah.
Maybe we can start with cultural heritage and coastal communities heritage. What is that?
Well, all of our cases are based along the coasts, and coastal communities heritage is not monolithic. So across all the cases, and even within a particular case, people see cultural heritage differently. In Zeeland, where I'm conducting my research,
in the Netherlands, cultural heritage is associated with big infrastructure projects like the Delta Works, for example, but also livelihoods and livelihood loss. There's cultural heritage that's connected to labor history. That's also changed because of the infrastructural works that are put in place to save Zeeland from flooding. So, coastal communities heritage can mean many different things to coastal communities located in various places. In La Malera, it's
their coastal heritage is very much associated with their whaling practices. That doesn't always neatly fit with national understandings of heritage conservation, for example, the conservation of natural heritage through, say, marine protected areas. So there's like different ways that people from at different situated in different spaces understand and practice cultural heritage.
So cultural heritage is not only material.
No.
Yeah. Yeah.
No. But I don't like to distinguish so clearly between what is tangible and intangible cultural heritage, because often, with material things, we attach meanings to them, right? That are intangible. So it's, the separation is that, to me, they're kind of conceptual containers.
So what field is studying heritage studies?
Well, there is a field called heritage studies. I don't come from that field. Okay. But I think heritage can be studied from many different angles. You can study heritage practices ethnographically, historically, broad sort of environmental studies, and interdisciplinary lenses. What we're trying to do here is trying to combine different perspectives on how we understand climate change to be or not to be a threat to cultural heritage. So the project is organized in different phases. So the first is the creation of physical risk maps that our colleagues in physical geography are currently doing. Okay. These phases are obviously not successive. We wanted it to be, but it's proven hard with the timeline. So the physical risk maps basically map all the risk climate-related risk associated with each case study or each study site. So in Zeeland, it would be sea level rise. In Ireland, it could be erosion or weathering, also abrasion. In Indonesia, erosion is a thing, tidal kind of flooding, but also the decline in cetacean population. I'm not sure how they're going to map that actually, but they wanted to know whether there is like a correlation between changes in migration routes and the hunting practices in this place. But then we wanted to kind of juxtapose these really common visualization of climate risk. Actually, we come to understand climate change often through these models, right? So we wanted to understand these risks through communities' perspectives as well. So do they see the same kind of risk? Do they see other risk? How do they see change more broadly, social and ecological, in relation to the future of their cultural heritage? In the first year, we focused a lot on creating kind of the methodological protocol for the project, because the cases are so different, and we wanted to allow freedom for each research partner to conduct their own research. But we also wanted to have common concepts to think with when we go to do field work, or questions about materiality or history that we bring into the project.
So you mentioned that you can study the heritage from an environmental perspective, from ethnographic, from all different perspectives. What's your own perspective here?
So what I have been doing in Zeeland is mainly ethnographic. So I wanted to really understand the memory work that is put in place to shape what water heritage in Ceylon is. So that entails, interviews, but a lot of museum visits as well. And through this research, actually, the project has expanded. So my case itself has expanded, because the first time I visited Ceylon, I went to the Flood Museum. I don't know if you've been.
But it sounds interesting.
Yeah, the Flood Museum was built to commemorate the 1953 flood. It's very much part of the Dutch narrative of water heritage, or even water nationalism, really. And in the last exhibit, at the time I visited, there was an exhibition called Dutch Waterworks Worldwide. And I'm from Indonesia. I was born in Jogja, in central Java, and then spent my childhood and formative years in Bogor, which is very close to Jakarta, which was formerly Batavia. It was the kind of administrative center of the Netherlands East Indies. And there are Dutch waterworks also in Jakarta. And in this exhibit in the museum, I was too absorbed to sort of take any photos. But there were a couple of pictures of Dutch waterworks in Java. So I thought it's not only important to understand how Dutch coastal communities or the Dutch society understands their cultural heritage. This heritage has sort of shaped other landscapes and societies, including my former home. So now the project looks at how Dutch water heritage is also seen from Jakarta. What stories does it tell that doesn't get told here? Cultural heritage hasn't always discussed in relation to climate change, but because climate change does pose threats to a lot of heritage assets, like if you think of Venice, for example. So there is this sort of nexus, I guess, that's emerging between cultural heritage and climate change. But the discussion's always framed around, or most often, the discussion is framed around how cultural heritage affects climate change and how cultural heritage itself can be part of the solution to address climate challenges. And there's also a lot of sort of emphasis on, we need to kind of understand how cultural heritage is differently understood and practiced, because singular definitions don't help. And this has been sort of discussed in the fields of heritage study as well, heritage studies for a while. But what we found was was less explored was how climate change itself became understood and articulated to cultural heritage. Sorry. So, in the Netherlands, Dutch water heritage has been increasingly linked to climate change, precisely also because the Dutch is kind of positioning itself as a leader for water expertise and climate adaptation globally. And this narrative of expertise is associated with having lived with rising waters, unruly waters, etc., etc. So even though expertise often, or like the export of expertise, doesn't immediately make someone would think, we wouldn't immediately think of Dutch water export as an export of heritage, but often the narrative of how the Dutch has gotten so good at managing water is very much related to its heritage of having dealt with water challenges.
Right. Yeah.
And so in around 2010 onwards, the International E-Commerce Council for Monuments and Sites in the Netherlands actually started to really promote water heritage specifically as something that can be useful for climate change adaptation.
Right.
They had they convened a conference called Protecting Deltas Heritage Helps in 2013, and then there's now like a global center for I'm not sure the exact name. I think it's a Center for Global Heritage or something like that. But water and heritage is one of its key themes, and e-commerce has actually adopted, e-commerce Netherlands has adopted water heritage as one of its main sort of themes.
Yeah, and e-commerce is what?
The International Council for Monuments and Sites.
Right.
It's an international organization.
Yeah.
It's a heritage institution.
Right.
It's an organization not unlike UNESCO.
Ah, okay.
I think. In La Malera, like I've mentioned before, it's sort of mainstream conservation practices have really clashed with whaling practices. If you look at the case of Dutch water heritage in Java, you could make the argument that the ways in which rivers and coast have been managed during colonial times have implications also on how people related to water, which is also a part of heritage too, right? So I guess there are, what I'm trying to say is focusing on climate change alone as something that poses risk to cultural heritage. Risk also obscuring other factors that affect cultural heritage. Like, for example, in Indonesia, how people practice indigeneity, for example, has probably been shaped more by sort of nationalist policies than climate change.
Right.
So it's not. Climate change is not the only thing that we should really focus on, because we might really kind of tunnel our vision. The reason why we wanted to use climate change rather than cultural heritage as an entry point, so like how do people understand climate change or environmental change in relation to their heritage practices, is because we wanted to see if that could generate broader discussions about the kind of other factors that might influence cultural heritage. So I had a conversation with Dr. Dedi Aduri. He's a marine anthropologist who is leading the case study in Indonesia, in La Malera. And he said climate change is not really in the lexicon of the community when they think about threats to their heritage practices.
Right.
They think more about sort of community cohesion, conservation practices. Those things affect how they can practice whaling more than like climate change to them, like how they understand sort of the future of the cultural heritage is related more to ensuring that there's community cohesion, that people respect adat, which are customs, rather than climate change itself. Because the Lamalaran community, they believe that if you go whaling, if you go hunting, when there is a disagreement or conflict amongst clan members or family members, that conflict will transpose to the whaling practices. So it's to them like that sense of community, cohesion and cooperation is central to being able to perform, to hunt. Yeah.
But now I'm thinking of small island nations that are always protesting at the COPs, at the climate conferences. What is your take on them? Clearly, climate change is important for at least for the people who are protesting there.
I don't doubt that.
Okay.
I don't. But I guess with small island nations as well, like their vulnerability to climate change itself is inseparable from histories of extraction and colonialism as well, right?
Yeah.
So I feel like that is also a factor. That's not just climate change. Climate change is I'm not trying to reduce the importance of climate change at all, and the threats that climate-related challenges pose to the continuation of particular forms of heritage. But I am only saying that there are also other factors that if we don't attend to them, we may not get a full sense of what it is that has been and is currently affecting cultural heritage.
I see. So in a way, there have been many influences on these coastal communities and their heritage, and climate change is just on top, or just one of the many sort of pressures.
Yeah, and I think I've only started researching coastal communities' heritage along the north coast of Java. So the north coast of Java is sinking, and at the same time the sea level is rising. So there is land that is already underwater. That's being taken by the sea. Homes and heritage that are lost with the loss of these places. Not many people talk about them in terms of heritage. But I mean, in Indonesia, where I'm from, like, not everyone have affiliation with the monuments that are supposed to commemorate something significant in those places.
So they are imposed by the government or by the...
Well, some for sure. I'm not saying that the communities can't develop attachments to them, or that heritage sites don't come from communities themselves, or the advocacy that of local communities. But it's heritage is always something that, I mean, for something to become a monument, it has to be designated as such, right? But there are other forms of heritage that affect our everyday lives as well. Family heritage. I mean, in Indonesia, it's colonial inheritance. Also here, you know, like. So I feel like with those places that are now lost, there are lots of heritage practices, there are lots of memories that are lost with that. I mean, not necessarily, because some people find ways to kind of maintain memories of places that no longer exist. those should be, I guess, counted as important heritage as well. And I think it points to the fact that, you know, there is a debate at the moment about how to navigate heritage loss. But that loss is different for different people. There was a workshop that I attended in May at Leiden University, and it was about reparative heritage, or how to repair heritage in times of climate change. And there was a representative from the Dutch Cultural Heritage Agency there, you know, like, we have so many things listed as heritage in the Netherlands. We have to choose what to take into the future with us. Like, you know, like, if we're trying to save heritage for the future, like, would future generations want us to spend all of this money now to save all of these heritage assets that we have? Like, would they have, would future generations find meaning in them? And do people currently find, attach the same meanings to them? Like, it's, I guess it speaks to, in our email exchange, you said, how does, like, what happens when heritage conservation clash with other sustainability goals? I mean, that people find different meanings, and they find different things important. That is at the crux of that too, right? Like, I mean, what do you prioritize?
Has this come up in your case studies?
Well, it does. So these are really kind of complicated questions, because I have also reservations with the notion of heritage conservation itself. So within heritage studies, there's this sort of, so for a long time, the disposition has been to preserve heritage, right? To ensure that actually it remains sort of authentic, even amidst changes. So actually, heritage preservation entails that you erase the passage of time. So it's sort of focused on this idea of fixity, of having always remained like this. And that has been critiqued because heritage practices also change with time, with social influences, ecological changes, etc., etc. I'll give you an example from my previous research. I did research on indigenous recognition in Indonesia, for example. The idea, which is codified into law, that indigenous people have historical continuity in a place, in land, has actually stopped a lot of indigenous communities to be able to claim their indigenous rights in Indonesia, because historically people have moved around including through forced migration in Indonesia. So like this idea that you have always remained in that place, it's not tenable. So I feel like heritage practices change, like they adapt, right? And I guess then our understanding on how to make sure that these practices can flourish into the future must recognize that these changes as well. So that you know, it is impossible to expect that a group of people or a monument, etc., can remain the same in the face of change. So like what happens when you have to conserve cultural heritage and also prioritize other things? It's like, well, what do you mean by preserving cultural heritage or conserving cultural heritage? In Indonesia, conservationists would say you shouldn't hunt for whales anymore. But whaling is so central to the cultural heritage of the Lamaleran people. It's attached to a whole system of social welfare.
What are the kind of the stakeholders that you are actually looking in the project? Is it the communities or somebody else, foundations, the government, local government?
So we work with non-academic partners. So in Indonesia, we are working with the National Research and Innovation Agency. And Pak Dedi Aduri, who is leading the project, he's a marine anthropologist with 3 decades of experience working with marine and coastal communities in Indonesia. And he has a relationship, I think, with the Lamaleran people. In the Netherlands, we're working with the Cultural Heritage Agency. In the new academic year, so in September, we want to do sort of participatory mapping workshops with some communities in Zeeland to sort of have a not to draw a map of Zeeland, just have a blank piece of paper where they can then locate the spaces that they find meaningful to them.
Which is interesting. It's my next question. What kind of tools or methods do you in the project, or maybe you can just focus on your work, are you using? Because in the project it said that documenting what has been lost, changed, valued, and is recoverable.
Yeah.
How do you trace that? Apart from, I guess, ethnography is one way to do it.
So in Zeeland, our focus is actually on the Schelde Global Geopark. I don't know.
What is that?
So the Schelde is one of the main rivers that flow into the North Sea in the Netherlands, that flow through the Netherlands. In 2024, the UNESCO granted a geopark designation to this area in Zeeland and across the border also into Belgium as a unified sort of geological place with international significance, and that it's entwined with the cultural heritage of this place, of this geopark. So geopark is sort of like a World Heritage designation. It's on par, but you have to show that this area that you want to make into a geopark has geological significance.
I see. Yeah.
So in the geopark you have several sites, they call geosites, where you can learn about the geological history of this place. So I'm slowly making my way through these geoparks just to understand how proponents of these geoparks have narrated the geological history of this place and how that is entangled with the culture that has developed there. It's mainly ethnographic work there. So, I do visit. So they also, the geopark has several sort of entry points, like visitor centers and museums where you can go and then learn also about a particular thing, but also the geopark more broadly. But they also have these geo sites with walking trails or cycling routes, and along the way you get a sense of the place, but also the geological history of that place. Like often you it's not so evident in the landscape, this history, like this geological history. So you rely on the documentation that accompanies these places. So there's quite a lot of kind of document analysis, archival work to do with making sense of these landscapes. But I guess I see the geopark as a curated space, right? There are these geosites that have been chosen carefully to showcase a particular geological history and how that is entangled with cultural heritage in that place. And I'm really interested in understanding, like just going there and understanding what stories are these places trying to tell us.
Right.
And so in September, I'm going to be doing walking interviews with people within the geopark, with not necessarily people who are connected to the geopark, but people who grew up there.
Yeah.
So there is a colleague actually here that is going to participate because she grew up in Zeeland.
Oh, yeah. Wait, so how you're looking at how stories are being created about these places, right?
Yeah, because this place is also, the story that is narrated is, this is an Anthropocene landscape.
Yeah. Why is this important? Why stories are important in this sense?
I think the geopark is, for me, quite an interesting site to understand how cultural heritage becomes linked to climate change.
Right.
Because the story that is told there is like, this is actually a landscape where climatic changes have always been present.
Right.
And we have shaped and reshaped the landscape through human intervention for sure, but also through movements. So the landscape in itself has been sort of formed through movements of sediments and water and the wind. And so, and they're the stories that it's naturally, because of this history, the geopark is naturally poised as a climate living lab, because it's precisely a space where we have always had to adapt to these climatic forces.
Interesting.
And like, so I guess that tells a story of how a certain heritage is being mobilized in times of climate change,
right?
But also how climate change and the Anthropocene has kind of provided space for people to probably rethink or make sense of cultural heritage. So I think it's a story that's important to tell, particularly because I guess it's connected again to like how the Netherlands is has for a long time shaped its national identity around water and water management, and now this is being articulated to climate change, and this story travels across the globe and will have manifestations in other places as well.
I wonder how that kind of research would be different in, let's say, the US, where climate change is not such a big concern from what we can hear from over there. I wonder what communities there are thinking about this. Do they have stories about?
I have no idea.
Okay.
I have not looked into the US at all, but I mean, I'm sure they have different stories to tell.
Yeah.
The story of the geopark, I'm not entirely sure how much of that is the stories of the communities.
Yeah. Okay.
Or it's this kind of stories that heritage institutions tell about a place.
Yeah. Okay.
So the idea of doing the walking interviews and the community mapping is to understand, like, do these stories that I've been learning about through official sites and channels, and by going there and being in that space, are they shared by the local communities who live there?
Yeah.
That's what I want to find out next. Because that's what's interesting, right? Like there's this effort that is being put in place to kind of renew the water heritage of Zeeland, in the age that some now call the Anthropocene. Are these stories actually shared by the people who lived there? Like when I stayed in Zeeland, so there was a big flood in the early 1500s that drowned the villagers around this area of the Oosterschelde. And Zuid-Beveland, it's this area near the Oosterschelde. That's one of the stories told by the geopark. You know, it's a cautionary tale of what can happen if we don't do something about unruly, quote-unquote, unruly waters. But also this story is attached to a story of extraction. This was in Yerseke, but in this moor, people used to extract peat. And apparently the peat extraction can be an explanation for why some of these villages drowned.
Okay.
So there's this sort of cautionary tale, basically. So that's a story that's told through the geopark. But in Valmedinge, like the village had its own sort of walking routes and that tell a different story. Like for example, about the oyster farming of the place, and the kind of labour history that has shifted with the closing of the barricading of the sea through the Delta Works. I also spoke to someone from the Cultural Heritage Agency about how there are overlapping cultural heritage regimes in Zeeland. It's not just the geopark. You have different kinds of heritage regimes that exist there. So these all try to tell something different. And so I'm just curious to what actually people in Zeeland think about these places, because they live there. Many Dutch people I encounter are very proud of their Dutch water heritage, but I'm not sure to what extent that is also the outcome of this sort of nationalist effort to construct monuments relating to water. A lot of Dutch World Heritage sites are water related. It's not only important who we learn about heritage from, but where we see it from is also really important, particularly when we are talking about sort of Dutch water heritage. There's this map, it's called the Atlas of Mutual Heritage. You can find it online, and it's a project. It's a collaborative effort between the Cultural Heritage Agency of the Netherlands, the National Archive, the Rijksmuseum, and I think that's it. But anyway, you can find it online, and it shows all the places in the world where the Dutch West India Company and East India Company have operated. And this shows that Dutch heritage has literally been on the move. It hasn't just shaped the Netherlands as a country, as a society, but so where you see Dutch heritage or Dutch water heritage from matters. In Jakarta, the canals that were built in the 17th century not only contained water, but they also contained different population groups within grids. So you have the Javanese, the Chinese, the Europeans, etc., etc. And so one historian, I can't remember her name, but she basically argued that racial hierarchy was literally inscribed in the city planning. And that's a heritage too, right? That's water.
Water planning.
The city was planned around managing water in Jakarta. So, the grids were also there for security as well. This is a monsoonal landscape, very different to the Netherlands. And I guess the Netherlands built a Dutch city in the tropics, but they did so also to contain different population groups within specific grids. And then later on, when they started providing sort of piped water supplies and artesian wells, they also only served or mostly served the European elite. So this sort of naturalized or normalized an understanding or a binary between the hygienic Europeans and the unhygienic natives. So this is part of, these don't tell stories of heroism and struggle against water that we learn about here in the Netherlands through different monuments, different stories. So I guess that's also important to look at. It's the place from which we're looking at this heritage matters as well as who's telling the story.
Yeah, so for you it's not only a scientific research, but also kind of a trip to revisit the past of Indonesia and reflect.
Yes, I don't know, I'm not sure what's scientific and what's not, but that we can get into a discussion about that. But I want to understand also how colonial waterworks have shaped the vulnerability of these landscapes now to kind of climate changes, or what we know and understand as climate challenges. The anthropologist Lauren Yap actually made the argument that because of the infrastructural choices that the Dutch made, and this sort of uneven development of water supply provision and flood protection, that flooding itself in Jakarta is a colonial inheritance. So, it's a...
Yeah. Okay.
And at the same time, the kind of narrative that we learn about here in the Netherlands about where Dutch expertise come from this heritage of living with unruly waters, and how this is useful now for climate adaptation. That story is also being mobilized to kind of, in the contemporary moment, for climate adaptation in these post-colonial landscapes.
Without any recognition of the history.
Often without recognition of the history, that this is also a landscape that has been has been shaped in part by the same sort of ecological thought or water expertise. Yeah, so that...
Yeah, very, very cool, very exciting. Because now there's a lot of contestation of the golden age of the Dutch golden age. But I have never heard about contesting these waterworks, the heritage of waterworks.
Yeah, I think it's partly because what we kind of associate with heritage, like we've talked about before, like that it's, there is a certain aura to heritage, and when something is inscribed as heritage, we tend to kind of imbue it with meanings, and I guess what I'm trying to kind of show through these stories is, or to kind of understanding what Dutch water heritage looks like from a place like Jakarta, is to show that this is heritage too, even when you don't recognize it as part of your heritage. Does that make sense? Like, this is Dutch water heritage too.
Yeah.
I think there's an interesting exhibition at the the Amsterdam World Museum called A Colonial Inheritance, and it's sort of links this sort of colonialism to the contemporary moment as well, how it sort of influences identities, global networks.